Hi guys, on this installment of PJ Cooks Sexy Food, I'm going to show you how to make my version of a porchetta roast using pork shoulder, a ton of fresh herbs, garlic. It's going to be wonderful. It's going to make an amazing sandwich. So let's get started. So the ingredients we're going to need for our porchetta today, we need 3 tablespoons of fennel seeds, 1/2 cup of rosemary, 1/4 cup of thyme, both are fresh, 12 cloves of garlic. We're going to need 2 tablespoons of salt, 1 tablespoon of freshly ground black pepper, 1/2 cup of extra virgin olive oil, 1/4 teaspoon of baking soda. We're going to need a 4.5 pound boneless pork shoulder or Boston butt. We're going to need a mortar and pestle. We're going to need some butcher twine, and we're going to need a sharp knife. So let's get started. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my fennel seeds in a small saute pan. I'm just going to sprinkle them on, and then I'm going to put them on a medium heat for just a minute or two. I want to lightly toast our fennel. Just when the kitchen starts to smell like Italian sausage, you know you're there. So our fennel seeds have been toasting for a few minutes. They started to really start to snap and crackle in there, and the kitchen smells like Italian sausage. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to transfer those seeds into my mortar and pestle. Just like that. Now using my mortar and pestle, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to grind these seeds into a fine powder. Now you could do this in a coffee grinder that you use just for spices, but I kind of have the enjoyment of doing this by hand in a mortar and pestle. It just gives me the feel that I'm actually working with the food more than I actually. So I've been working this for about a minute or two, and you can see now it's at a fine powder. This is what we wanted. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to set this off to the side so we can start to combine our rub that's going to go on that piece of pork. So breaking out our food processor, we're going to add in our pepper, 2 teaspoons of that kosher salt, our garlic cloves, all of that fennel powder that we created. Now the reason why we did this is because if we put the fennel seeds directly into the food processor, they wouldn't break down into a powder. And the reason we toasted these fennel seeds is it's going to break out those essential oils and it's going to make this even better. Now I went ahead and I just popped in the thyme and the rosemary. Now I'm going to clamp on the lid. I'm going to pulse this about 10 to 15 times just so everything starts to break down. So it's pulsed a couple of times. You can see everything has started to chop up nicely. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to add in all of our olive oil. And I'm using a good fruity, peppery, extra virgin olive oil. And then I'm going to clamp the lid on, and I'm going to let this go on high speed for just a few moments, just until we create a nice paste. Okay, so as you can see, we have this beautiful herb paste that we just created. I'm going to take this out of the food processor and transfer this into a small bowl. Now that our paste is off to the side, we're going to turn our attention to our beautiful pork shoulder that we have here. I have a nice 4.5 pound Boston butt. Now what I want to do first is on the side where the fat is. Now you can see it looks like there's a little meat here, but if you look right into the meat, there's a big piece of fat. That's exactly how you want it. If you can get even more fat on the top, it would be even better. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just take one of my sharpest knives and I'm going to make some shallow slits right across the top. I'm making a diamond pattern. Going right across, all the way across the fat cap. I'm going to turn it. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. By doing this, that fat is going to render off the fat cap, and this is going to create a beautiful crust or crackling on the top, which is what is a signature look to the porchetta. Now, traditionally, porchetta is made with like a pork tenderloin and is made with pork belly. So we're doing a slight revision by doing it here with a pork butt. Now that the cross hatches are done, I'm going to lay the roast on its side. And I'm going to turn it around so it's facing me. And then what I'm going to do is, with my knife, I'm going to go right into the meat. I'm going to go straight down. And I want to make a couple of long slits across the meat, about 1.5 inches apart. The reason why I'm doing this is I'm going to fill these slits with that herb paste. So this flavor that we created, this profile, is going to be permeating this entire roast. So every slice that we have is going to have that beautiful flavors in it. So we got all the way through. Flip it over, and we're going to find our slits from the other side, and we're just going to go straight through, just like that. And you feel our slits go all the way through because we lined up right with the other ones. Perfect. Now we're going to take our roast. We're going to take 2 more teaspoons of that salt, and we're going to sprinkle that on the meat. Work it into the grooves. Okay, flip it over. I'm going to do this side as well with another teaspoon. Perfect. I'm going to work that right in. Make sure all that salt is permeating that meat. Perfect. Now, we're going to focus on our paste. And we're going to use all of this paste. First thing we want to do is we want to take the paste and we want to make sure we get it into every one of those slits. And that's why I'm doing this over a pan, because if you do this on your counter, it's going to be very messy. Okay, flip it over, go into those slits that we created on the other side. Okay, now that we have that all covered, now we're going to take the rest of our paste and we're going to cover the entire outside of the meat, but we're not going to put this herb paste on that fat cap. We want that fat cap to stay clean. We don't want any of this paste on it. You can see how we covered everything with that paste. Now, we're going to tie this roast up. So to tie our roast, what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a fresh pan, and we're going to put the strings on our fresh pan first. So I have my pan here, and I laid out my 5 strings across. And now I'm going to pick up the porchetta. I'm going to lay it right on top of our strings. If it looks like our strings are a little too spaced far apart, you can always pull them close together. There we go. Put our meat right on there, and now I'm going to tie up our roast. So I personally like to start in the middle, so I'm going to take our twine. I'm going to give it a surgeon's knot, which is going around twice instead of once on your first pass. Give it a little pull, and then just do a basic knot. I'm going to do this across all 5 strings. Okay, now that our roast is nice and tight, I'm just going to cut off all these excess tails that we have here. And you may be questioning, PJ, why did you tie the roast after you basted it with the rub instead of tying it first? Because if we tied it, then we wouldn't be able to get into all those grooves that we created to create that beautiful herb crusting. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the rest of the salt that we have left, as well as that baking soda that we had. I'm going to mix those two together, just here in a little bowl. And now I'm going to rub this into that fat cap on top. I want to try to get into all the grooves that we cut into the crosshatch, because this is now going to create that beautiful crusty skin. It's going to make it golden brown. It's going to flavor that skin. This is why we also didn't put any of that herb paste on the top of the roast. Okay, got it in between all those crosshatches. Work that in. Now comes the hard part. We need to take this roast, we need to place it into the refrigerator uncovered for anywhere from 6 to 24 hours. The longer you let it sit, the more the flavors are going to penetrate into the meat. So I like going for as long as possible. So we're going to let this go till then, and we'll bring it out and show it to you what it's going to look like tomorrow. Okay, so I just took our meat out of the refrigerator. It's been in there for 24 hours. You can see how the top has just started to get a little bit of a dryness to it. You can see I touch it, it's not tacky. There's no moisture on my fingers. That's how I wanted it to be. So what I'm gonna do is I have my large roasting pan right here. I went ahead and I lined it with foil for ease of cleanup. I'm gonna take our roast, place it right into our pan. Any of the oil that was dripped out of the meat that ran off while it was marinating, I'm just pouring that into the bottom of the pan. Just like that. Now I'm going to cover this with aluminum foil. I'm going to place it in a 350 degree oven, covered for about 2.5 to 3 hours until the internal temperature of the meat reads 180 degrees. Okay, so our meat has been in the oven for about 3 hours now. Taking off the foil. Oh, it smells like heaven in here. Now, let's take its temperature. We are at 179 degrees. We're right there. 1 degree off from where I said I wanted to be, but I'm very happy with that. So the next thing I want to do is I want to drain off all this juice from the bottom of the pan. I'm then going to put the meat on a rack. But before I do that, I'm cranking my oven up to 500 degrees. Because what's going to happen now, we're going to put this back in the oven. We're going to get that skin really good and crisp. And what we're also going to do is we're going to remove these strings. Because we don't want these strings cooking into the fat, because then we'll never get them off the skin, and it'll just rip it right off. So let's get these strings off first. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and put this, drain off that juice and get that into a rack. Okay, so the strings are removed. They drained the liquid off the bottom. I put it onto a wire rack. I'm going to pop this back into our oven now that I have it 500 degrees till it gets really golden crunchy on the outside and the internal temperature reaches 190 degrees to 195 degrees. The liquid that I drained from the pan, I put into a bowl. I'm going to pop that in the refrigerator so that this way that layer of fat on top will solidify, and I'll take that off. And I'll have this beautiful liquid that the meat cooked in for the juices that drained out, as well as all those herbs that we'll use to dress the meat later. So let's go ahead and get this back into the oven. Okay, so it's been 30 more minutes in the oven. We are now at 192.6 degrees. A little bit over, but that's perfect. Now the hardest part. We need to let this meat sit and rest for at least 30 minutes for the juices to redistribute into the meat before we can slice it and make our sandwiches. Oh my God, I cannot wait to dig into this. So our meat has had a chance to rest. You can see how gorgeous this looks. I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna go start slicing this. Oh, look at how moist and juicy that is. Look at that, all that herb filling. The fat inside is all but melted. Take a couple of slices of this. I'm going to use this to make a beautiful sandwich. Nothing more than just the meat on a plain piece of bread. I hope you enjoyed this recipe. I hope you try it at home. Thank you for tuning in to PJ Cooks Sexy Food. See you next time.